We're coming to the issue then of why they dropped the atomic bomb. We got this out of order. I'm missing something here. Yeah, right here. So Japan, while Potsdam was going on, Japan was, at that moment, sending terms for peace. They wanted this war over desperately. Remember, their whole goal was to inflict so many casualties on the Americans that the Americans would finally just say it's not worth it and accept some kind of term. They knew they'd been defeated, but they wanted to save face. And the only way they thought they could save face is keep the emperor. The thought was the army can't go nuts because they could say at least the emperor is saved and Japan is still a country. They didn't want occupation. They didn't want it divided up in zones, even though that was still kind of open. Most people had never, most Japanese civilians had never seen or heard the emperor. In fact, that little spot right there, that's on the morning of August 14th. The first time they ever heard him on the radio, when he told the Japanese they must accept the unbearable and accept surrender. That's the first time they ever heard his voice. And so this whole thing was that they could keep it, but to the United States, they could not accept that. That was a term. Now, they did think about maybe changing it to there be agreements or maybe some leeway on that, but they never went any further than that. And so the decision was, we got to end the war now. By the way, did Japan keep their emperor? Yes. Japan kept their emperor. So maybe they could have ended earlier if they would have accepted it right there, but thousands would have survived. They ended up giving their emperor, and then he would die in 81 or 82. And then the emperor now, they might have to go to a different relative because there's no direct heir. So these are the reasons the United States decided to finally drop that atomic bomb. And the reasons I went through now, you don't have to write everything down. Figure out your own way to write this down, but I wanted to make sure I get this. The reason one, we wanted this war over as quickly as possible. In summer, we know we're going to win. So we talked about submarine justice, didn't we? We knew. But the thing about it was, we thought, if there's any more fighting, remember Bushido? How they fought on Iwo Jima, Okinawa, 30,000 Japanese soldiers died. Kamikazes. What might the invasion be? If Japan does surrender, let's say they thought 3 months. Why 3 months? That's how much oil they had. There would still be almost 10,000 American soldiers die in that fighting. Because there'll still be fighting going on in those 3 months. It's not like they're going to quit. Hey, we'll call a timeout. And Operation Olympus was the plan for the invasion. If we did have to invade, the plan was to invade this island down here. Truman was told there'd be 31,000 casualties, American casualties. Those are killed, wounded, and missing. But after the bomb was dropped, Truman started saying 1 million casualties. I saved 1 million American casualties by dropping the atomic bombs. And people say it to this day. No, the military did not believe that. Now, it doesn't mean that there wouldn't have been more than 31,000. But this is a number that Truman would use to justify using those ultimate weapons after the fact. You get what I mean by that? He's not telling the truth. But he would say so often, I think people believe it, including him. You know, once you repeat a lie so much, eventually it becomes true to you. This is one of these maps implying, look how many men the Japanese have. They were ready to surrender, but not before Russia entered, and not quick enough. Next, we're dealing with this horrible nation, this beast. This was such a racially charged war. Racial epithets were used all the time. One, there's this propaganda film, and it's horrific how racist they were. And throughout, they kept saying LYBs. We must kill the LYBs. Get the LYBs. Little yellow bellies. This was an American propaganda. I want to be clear about it. Japan was very racist too, but that just gives you an idea of racism. You can combine that with Japanese internment, and there's Bugs Bunny cartoons and Looney Tunes cartoons that are horrifically racist against Japanese during this war's propaganda. When I was a little kid, those old cartoons would be shown. So I remember those, these racist cartoons that they don't show anymore. I'm not that warped. Next, not only that, revenge. Pearl Harbor, the way they treated the POWs, the Bataan Death March and POWs. We wanted revenge. We got to get them back. So much of the reason why the British, for example, wanted to destroy Dresden and kill so many was revenge. Revenge is such a strong motivator. And there's Pearl Harbor. Here's a quote by Truman. You don't need to write it down, obviously. Can everyone read it okay? Look at that quote. And that gives you the idea of the attitude that many Americans have from the top down. Dehumanizing the enemy, turn them into beasts. Gee, doesn't that sound like a lot of other things we've talked about? Isn't it almost the same as the justification with slavery? The justification of taking lands from American Indians? What they were saying about justifying keeping on immigrants? Once you turn your enemy into the beast, you can say anything you want, calling them animals, or things such as that. And people still use this rhetoric to this day. It is a way to dehumanize your enemy to justify doing horrible things. 3. We spent so much. The Manhattan Project cost $2 billion. Look how much that is in today's dollars, approximately. And the B-29 cost $2 billion too. We had to justify it. That's a different version of Trinity. How could we say we spent all this money to build a weapon and we didn't use? In fact, how could we not use that weapon and allow more Americans to die? Can you imagine how bad politically the leaders would have? You had to end this war. By the way, the whole thing is political. This is all political. These are all political decisions, kind of. So, it's a lot of money. And why not use it? They're already killing civilians. In fact, and that's a pretty amazing picture of Tokyo after that first firebombing. One of the most amazing things, nobody really gave it much of a thought. Truman was not told about the Manhattan Project until after Roosevelt died, April 1945. Yet, Truman did not say, okay, I order this bomb to be dropped. There was never this conscious decision, we're going to drop the atomic bomb. They made it, and they always thought they were going to use it. After the war, Truman is going to present it as he made a careful, calculated decision on whether or not to use this ultimate weapon. No, not at all. Truman never gave an order to use the weapon. Truman didn't order them to stop it. He made it. We're going to use it. And this bothered him after the fact when people realized the real effect of the atomic bomb. Then it became, oh, we want more kind of a process to think about whether or not to use this ultimate weapon. I mean, they made it, they just assumed they would use it. In fact, Truman had no idea where it would be dropped. He didn't have any idea, even though he acted like he did after the fact. And I should add one more thing. What was the program to build the atomic bomb? Yeah, the Manhattan Project. Where did they build the bomb at? You know where? Yeah, Los Alamos, New Mexico. They made 3 bombs. One was a test, had 2 more, 2 different types of bombs. Dropped them both. Why did we drop them both? Because we had 2. If we would have had 3, we would have dropped 3.
What did they do with the test one?
Blew it up. We had to test it. We had to ignite the. I'll show you that in a second.
Mojave.
No, it's in New Mexico. Alamogordo. And why did we drop 2? Even though that was our last one, we'd have another bomb for 6 months. When you drop 2, it implies you have many more than 1. And therefore, it's telling the Japanese, hey, we got more. We're going to drop them, even though we didn't have more. That's why they did it. That's why they dropped 2. And, oh, I should add one more thing. We had 2 bombs. Why didn't we do a test? Or like an exhibition? You would say, hey, we're going to blow up an island and show you what we have. And if you don't surrender, the next one will be on Tokyo. So we'll blow up an uninhabited island. You see the problem with that? First problem. Let's say with this, the carp, my little Rugsy Island. B-29 flies over. They're pretty good, huh? And they drop the bomb. Dud. It's a dud. It sits there, and we look like idiots. We weren't 100% sure the bomb would work. Therefore, we wanted to give no warning. So if it didn't work, we don't look like idiots. Secondly, they attacked us. They start this war. They're our enemy. And we are afraid to use this weapon against them. Who is going to look at that and say, those guys are soft. Soft. And that's number 5. Impress and intimidate the Soviets. Yalta, by this time, it seemed like the United States was tricked in many ways by begging them to come into war. Now, what are they going to take? Eastern Europe, they promised free elections. Jimmy Burns, his Secretary of State, said we got to make the Soviets play ball in Europe. How do we get them to play ball in Europe and allow free elections? To show that we not only have this weapon, but we are not afraid to use it, and we're just as ruthless as you, if necessary. Yeah, this was a real fear. That's all they talked about was the Soviets. So those were the reasons why they dropped the bomb. And you'll see it's pretty complex, isn't it? There's no one reason, and some are more important than others. Yes, they want to end the war, but they wanted to end the war in a certain way. Yes, they were fearful of invasion, but didn't mean they had to do it. Yes, they were fearful of the Soviets. Because on August 6th, the first bomb was dropped. And they wanted it dropped before. Well, let me rephrase that. They wanted the war over before the Soviets entered. The 6th is when they could finally do it. The test was, the first bomb exploded. The test was July 16th. Then they had to get the bomb to Tinian Island. So it's going to take a while. And then on the 8th, this is, and I like the fact that it's not in English. I just thought that was kind of funny. This was the offensive of Manchuria. The Soviets attacked in the biggest operation in world history and the fastest military advance in history. The Soviets hit them like a sledgehammer and pushed them back. In fact, they went all the way into Korea. They kept fighting even out to the Japanese surrender. The Russians got it all. After the atomic bomb was dropped, they didn't really talk much about the atomic bomb. In fact, they didn't really know about the atomic bomb in Tokyo. They didn't know about Hiroshima to really understand for about 3 days. And in those 3 days, Nagasaki had been bombed overnight. But they talked about the Soviets. And they were terrified of the Soviets. And that's all they could talk about. And we can't let the Soviets take Japan. And we hate the Russians. Remember they fought them back in 1904, 1905. We don't want them. So, before we get to that,